They say the truth sets you free, but sometimes it shatters everything you thought you knew. I spent 26 years believing my parents' divorce was just another sad statistic. Two people who grew apart, nothing more. My father remarried 2 years ago, and he begged me to respect his new wife, to give her a chance. I tried. I really did. But then I found those photographs hidden in the back of his desk drawer, and in an instant, my entire childhood made terrible, perfect sense. The woman smiling up at my father in those faded pictures, her hand intertwined with his, was the same woman now sleeping in my mother's bedroom. And those photos were dated 1998, the year everything fell apart. Real, life-inspired emotional stories from USA, Canada, UAE, and Europe, filled with truth, betrayal, love, and redemption. Each story touches the soul and reveals what really happens behind closed doors. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing to Grandma True Stories. It helps more people find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Now let me tell you what really happened. My phone rang at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning in March, the kind of call that makes your heart drop before you even answer. I was grading papers at my kitchen table, my coffee getting cold beside me, when my father's name flashed across the screen. Emma? It wasn't my father's voice. It was hers. Diana, you need to come. Your father's had a stroke. The world tilted sideways. I remember dropping my red pen, watching it roll across the stack of student essays about symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Ironic, I thought later, all those papers about illusion and reality, about the past we can't escape. How bad. My voice sounded strange, distant. The paramedic said it's minor, thank God. But he's asking for you. We're at Hartford General. I made the 40-minute drive in 30. My hands gripping the steering wheel, so tight my knuckles went white. My father, my strong, stubborn, 71-year-old father who still insisted on mowing his own lawn and refused to admit he needed reading glasses, was in a hospital bed. When I arrived, Diane was in the waiting room, perfectly composed despite the early hour. She wore cream-colored slacks and a cashmere sweater, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was 56, 15 years younger than my father, and she carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that had always made me feel slightly off balance. He's stable, she said, standing to meet me. But they're running more tests, but the doctor thinks he'll make a full recovery. It was caught early. Can I see him? Of course. Room 412. I found my father propped up against pillows, looking smaller somehow, more fragile than I'd ever seen him. His silver hair was disheveled, and there was an IV in his arm that made my stomach clench. Emma, Bean, he said, using the nickname from my childhood. His speech was slightly slurred, but his eyes were clear. You didn't have to rush over. Dad. I took his hand, felt how papery his skin had become. When had he gotten so old? Don't be ridiculous. Of course I came. We talked for a few minutes. The doctor's prognosis, his medications, whether he'd been overdoing it in the garden again. Then Diane appeared in the doorway with coffee for both of us, and my father's whole face softened when he looked at her. What would I do without you? He said to her, and she smiled, crossing to kiss his forehead. I looked away, that familiar discomfort settling in my chest. It had been 2 years since they'd married. 2 years since my father had introduced me to this woman, who'd appeared seemingly out of nowhere. I've met someone special. He'd told me over dinner at his favorite Italian restaurant. Her name is Diane. I'd like you to meet her. I'd tried to be happy for him. My mother had been gone for 5 years by then, lost to cancer that had ravaged her body in 6 brutal months. My father had been alone, rattling around in that big house in West Hartford with nothing but memories and regret. He deserved companionship, I told myself. He deserved a second chance at happiness. But something about Diane had always bothered me, though I couldn't put my finger on what. She was kind enough, thoughtful even. She remembered my birthday, asked about my teaching, never tried to replace my mother or overstep boundaries. Still, there was something in the way she looked at me sometimes. A flicker of guilt, maybe, or was I imagining it? You should respect Diane, my father had told me more than once. She makes me happy, Emma. That's all that matters at my age. So I'd swallowed my unease and played the dutiful daughter. What else could I do? The doctor arrived with test results, and I stepped into the hallway to give them privacy. That's when I called Sarah, my best friend since college. He's okay? I told her, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. Minor stroke. They think he'll recover fully, but Sarah, he looks so old, so fragile. I'm so sorry. Do you need me to come? No, I'm okay. It's just. I paused, watching through the window as Diane adjusted my father's pillows, her movements gentle and practiced. It made me realize he's not going to be here forever. And I've been so distant with him since he married her. What if I run out of time to, I don't know, to fix whatever's broken between us? Then fix it? Sarah said simply. You're his daughter. That bond doesn't break. After I hung up, the doctor emerged with his assessment. My father would need to stay for a few days of observation, and then he'd require help at home during his recovery. Assistance with medications, physical therapy appointments, someone to make sure he didn't overexert himself. I can take a leave from school, I said immediately. I'll stay with him. Diane started to protest. Emma, that's not necessary, I can. I want to. I interrupted more sharply than I intended. He's my father? Something passed across her face. Hurt, maybe, or was it relief? Of course, she said quietly. Whatever's best for Robert. My father came home 3 days later. Still weak but improving. I'd already moved into the guest room, the same room that had been mine growing up before I'd left for college. The house felt different now. Filled with Diane's touches, new curtains in the living room, different dishes in the kitchen, unfamiliar photographs on the mantel of her and my father on various trips and outings. The pictures of my mother were gone, boxed up or stored away somewhere. I'd noticed that the first time I'd visited after they'd married, and it had stung more than I wanted to admit. You're not eating enough. I told my father at dinner that first night, watching him push food around his plate. I'm eating plenty. You're fussing? Someone needs to fuss over you. Diane smiled from across the table. I've been trying to tell him that for 2 years. He's stubborn. I learned it from the best, I said, and was surprised to find myself almost smiling at her. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe spending time here, taking care of my father, would help me finally accept his new life, his new wife. Maybe I could let go of the past and the ghost of my mother that still seemed to haunt these rooms. I had no idea that within a week, I'd discover a truth that would make me wish I'd never come back to this house at all. The rhythm of caregiving became familiar quickly. I'd wake early, make breakfast for my father, scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, fresh fruit cut into small pieces because his coordination was still shaky. I'd lay out his medications in the little plastic organizer Diane had bought, making sure he took each pill at the right time. Then came physical therapy exercises, short walks around the block, crossword puzzles to keep his mind sharp. Diane went back to her part-time work at an interior design firm after the first week, grateful, I think, to have me there. Call me if anything changes, she'd say each morning, kissing my father's cheek before she left. I can be home in 20 minutes. My father's recovery was progressing well but slowly. His speech had improved, though he still searched for words sometimes, pausing mid-sentence with a frustrated look that broke my heart. The left side of his body was weaker, making him unsteady on his feet. He hated needing help, hated the walker the physical therapist insisted he use. I'm not an invalid, he grumbled one afternoon as I helped him from his armchair to the bathroom. No one said you were. But you're also not 25 anymore, Dad. Let me help you. He softened at that, patting my hand. When did you become the parent? The minute you scared me half to death with that stroke. It was during the second week that I started really settling in, unpacking more of my things, organizing the guest room to feel less temporary. I'd taken a month's leave from my teaching position, and my principal had been understanding. Family comes first, she'd said. Your students will be here when you get back. One afternoon while my father napped, I decided to tackle some administrative tasks he'd been putting off. Filing insurance claims, organizing medical bills, updating his emergency contact information. He'd waved vaguely toward his study when I'd asked where he kept important documents. Desk drawer, filing cabinet, somewhere in that mess. Good luck finding anything. Your mother was the organized one? The study was exactly as I remembered it from childhood. Dark wood paneling floor to ceiling bookshelves. The massive oak desk that had belonged to my grandfather. My father had spent countless hours here when I was growing up, working on briefs and case files. He'd been a lawyer, successful but not wealthy, the kind who took pride in helping regular people navigate the legal system. I started with the filing cabinet, which was surprisingly well organized. Diane's influence? Probably, but the desk drawers were another story. A chaos of old receipts, expired coupons, rubber bands, paper clips, business cards from people whose faces my father had probably forgotten. The insurance information wasn't in the obvious places, so I started digging deeper, pulling out entire drawers to check the backs. That's when I noticed it. The bottom drawer on the right side sat higher than it should, like something was keeping it from sliding all the way back. I pulled the drawer completely out and set it on the floor. There, attached to the underside of the desk, was a small wooden compartment, the kind you'd never notice unless you were looking for it, or unless you'd built it yourself, deliberately hidden. My hands were shaking as I reached inside. I'm not sure what I expected to find, money, maybe, or old love letters from my mother. What I pulled out instead was a manila envelope, worn soft with age, unsealed. Inside were photographs, maybe 30 of them, some in color, some black and white, all printed on the kind of glossy photo paper we'd used before everything went digital. I spread them across the desk, my heart beginning to pound even before I understood what I was seeing. My father, younger, maybe in his mid-40s, still with brown in his hair. He was smiling in every picture, genuinely happy in a way I rarely remembered from my childhood. And beside him, her hand in his, her head on his shoulder, her lips pressed against his cheek, was a woman. Not my mother. The woman was younger than my father, blonde, pretty in a wholesome, girl, next door way. In some photos they were at restaurants. In others they walked along a beach I didn't recognize. In one they sat on a hotel bed, sheets rumpled behind them, in both wearing robes and grinning at the camera like teenagers in love. My stomach turned. These were affair photos. Hidden affair photos. My father had kept them all these years, secret and safe. And I picked up one of the photos to look closer at the woman's face, and that's when the world stopped spinning. I knew that face. The bone structure was the same. The eyes green, slightly tilted at the corners. The smile warm but with something calculated behind it. The small mole just above her left eyebrow. I was looking at Diane. 5 years younger, with longer hair and fewer lines around her eyes, but unmistakably, impossibly Diane. The photograph slipped from my fingers and fluttered back to the desk. I grabbed another one, then another, studying each face with growing horror. It was her. All of them were her. My father and Diane decades ago, clearly in love, clearly having an affair. I turned one of the photos over. Someone had written on the back in my father's handwriting, Cape Cod, July 1998. Best weekend of my life. But the year my mother had filed for divorce. The year she'd stopped smiling. The year I'd heard her crying through her bedroom door night after night while my father claimed he was working late at the office. The year my whole world had fallen apart, and no one would tell me why. Your father and I have grown apart, my mother had said when she sat me down to explain the divorce. I was 16, angry, confused. Sometimes marriages just don't work out, sweetheart. It's no one's fault. But it was someone's fault. It was his fault, and hers, Diane's. I sat back in my father's desk chair, photos scattered around me like evidence at a crime scene. Because that's what this felt like. Evidence. Proof of a betrayal that had destroyed my mother, that had torn our family apart, that had been hidden and denied for over 2 decades. And now that woman, that home-wrecking, family-destroying woman, was sleeping in my mother's bed, wearing my mother's title, playing the role of concerned wife while I'd been foolish enough to feel guilty for not warming up to her faster. Emma. My father's voice called from the living room. Emma, are you there? I need help getting up. I stared at the photographs, at the evidence of his lies spread across his desk. Part of me wanted to gather them all up, march into the living room, and throw them in his face. Demand answers. Demand the truth he'd been hiding for 26 years. But another part of me, the part that had watched him struggle to lift a coffee cup that morning, the part that had seen how fragile he'd become, that part kept me frozen in the chair. Emma, his voice was worried now. Where are you? Coming, Dad. I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. Just a minute. I gathered the photographs with trembling hands and slid them back into the envelope. I put the envelope back in its hiding place, replaced the drawer, arranged everything exactly as I'd found it. Then I stood, smoothed my shirt, took 3 deep breaths, and went to help my father to the bathroom. He smiled at me gratefully as I steadied his walker. What would I do without you, Emma Bean? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something crack inside my chest. This man had lied to me my entire adult life. He'd let me believe in a sanitized version of the past, a gentle story about marriages that simply didn't work out. He'd let me comfort my mother through her grief without ever knowing that her grief had a name, a face that now sat across from us at dinner every night. I don't know, Dad, I said quietly, helping him forward. What would you do? That night, After my father was asleep and Diane had come home from work, I sat in the guest room and called Sarah. "I found something," I said when she answered. "Something bad." "What kind of bad?" "The kind that changes everything." I told her about the photographs, about recognizing Diane, about the dates that aligned perfectly with my parents' divorce. Sarah was silent for a long moment after I finished. Oh my God. I don't know what to do." My voice cracked. "He's recovering from a stroke. He's vulnerable." "But Sarah, this woman destroyed my mother. Mom died 5 years ago still carrying that pain, and I never knew why because he never told me the truth. And now he's married to her? How is that even possible? Maybe they reconnected later," Sarah suggested. "Maybe it's a coincidence? The way he looks at her, the way she touches him? They're comfortable together, Sarah. Too comfortable. This wasn't some rekindled romance, I think." I swallowed hard. "I think they never really ended. I think maybe they've been together, on and off, this whole time. You need to talk to him? I know. But maybe wait until he's stronger." "How much stronger?" "When is the right time to ask your father why he's been lying to you for your entire adult life?" Sarah didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, listening to the house settle around me. Down the hall, I could hear my father's soft snoring. And beyond that, from the master bedroom, the sound of Diane moving around, getting ready for bed, in my mother's room, in my mother's house, in my mother's life. The woman who'd stolen it all 26 years ago, and somehow, impossibly, had gotten away with it. The next few days were torture. I went through the motions of caregiving, medications, meals, physical therapy exercises, while the knowledge of what I'd found burned inside me like acid. Every time Diane touched my father's hand, every time he smiled at her with that soft, contented look, I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. I became a detective in my own father's house. When Diane left for work and my father napped, I searched. Not for more photographs. I already had all the proof I needed, but for understanding. For the full story of how this had happened, how it had continued, how they'd ended up here. I found a box in the attic labeled "Old Tax Returns" that contained anything but. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in feminine handwriting on cream-colored stationery. I recognized the signature before I'd finished reading the first one, Diane. The letters spanned years, 1998, 1991, 2005, 2012, 2015, 2018, gaps between some, clusters of others, but form in a pattern that made me sick. They'd never stopped. Even after the divorce, even during the years my mother was dying, they'd maintained contact. The early letters were passionate, desperate. "I miss you so much it physically hurts. When can I see you again? I hate that we have to hide this." The later ones were more mature, but no less intimate. "Thank you for last weekend. I keep those memories close during the hard times. I know we agreed to keep our distance while Emma is home from college, but I had to write. Someday, Robert. Someday we won't have to hide anymore." And then, dated just months after my mother's funeral, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I know how much you loved her, in your way. When you're ready, I'll be here. I've always been here." I sat on the attic floor, surrounded by evidence of a secret life my father had led parallel to the one I'd known. All those business trips when I was growing up, all those late nights at the office, all those conferences and cases that kept him away from home. How many had been lies? How many had been time stolen to spend with her? And my mother, had she known? The thought made my chest tight. Had she known exactly who the other woman was, carried that knowledge to her grave, while I remained blissfully, stupidly ignorant. "Emma." Diane's voice drifted up from downstairs. "I'm home. Did your father eat lunch?" I shoved the letters back into the box and climbed down from the attic, composing my face into something neutral. Diane stood in the kitchen, setting down her purse and design portfolios. "He had soup and a sandwich," I said, my voice flat. "He kept most of it down." "Good." "That's good." She studied me with those green eyes, the same eyes that had stared up at my father in those photographs, young and adoring. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." "I'm fine. You've been so quiet the last few days. I know this is a lot, taking care of him. You don't have to do it alone, you know. I'm here to help." The audacity of it, standing in my mother's kitchen, wearing my mother's concerned expression, offering to help care for the man they'd both betrayed my mother with. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. I said I'm fine, I repeated, and walked out before she could say anything else. That evening, the three of us sat down to dinner together. Diane had made pot roast, my father's favorite, and he praised it effusively. I pushed food around my plate and watched them interact. The casual intimacy of a long relationship. The shorthand communication of people who'd known each other forever. Because they had known each other forever. For 26 years, on and off, in secret and now in the open. My entire adult life had been punctuated by their affair. "Emma, you're not eating," my father observed, setting down his fork. His coordination had improved enough that he only occasionally missed his mouth now, a small victory we'd celebrated just yesterday. "Not very hungry? Are you feeling all right?" Diane asked. "There's a stomach bug going around. One of my coworkers was out sick all last week." "I'm not sick." The words came out sharper than I intended. "I'm just tired." My father and Diane exchanged a look, that married couple telepathy that said more than words. She reached over and squeezed his hand, a gesture of solidarity, of partnership, of us against the world. Or in this case, us against his difficult daughter who couldn't seem to accept their happiness. "You're working yourself too hard taking care of me," my father said gently. "Why don't you take a break? Go out with Sarah for the evening. Diane can help me with my exercises tonight." "I don't need a break. Emma! I said I don't need a break." I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Both of them stared at me in shock. I need some air." I grabbed my jacket and walked out into the cool March evening, not caring where I was going, just needing to move. I ended up at the small park 3 blocks away, the same park where my mother used to take me after school when I was little. We'd feed the ducks and she'd push me on the swings and everything had been simple and safe and good. Before it all fell apart, before he destroyed her, my phone buzzed. "Sarah, how are you holding up?" I called her instead of texting. I found letters. Dozens of them. They never stopped seeing each other, Sarah. Not really. Through my entire childhood, through college, through Mom's cancer, they were always there, in the background, waiting. "Jesus, she wrote to him after Mom died. Offered to be there when he was ready. Like she'd been waiting her whole life for my mother to get out of the way." My voice broke. "And the worst part? I think she was. I think they both were." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Every time I look at him, I see a stranger. This man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding. I don't know who he is anymore." "He's still your father?" "Is he?" Because the father I thought I had wouldn't have done this. Wouldn't have lied for 26 years. Wouldn't have married his mistress and expected me to smile and accept it. A duck waddled up to my bench, looking for food. I watched it for a moment, remembering my mother's laugh as I'd chased these same ducks around the pond when I was 6 or 7. She'd been so alive then, so vibrant. Before the divorce had dimmed something essential inside her. "I keep thinking about Mom," I told Sarah, about how she was after the divorce. She tried to hide it from me, tried to stay strong, but I remember. She'd cry in the shower where she thought I couldn't hear. She'd stare out windows like she was looking for something she'd lost. And when she got sick, when the cancer came, there was almost a relief in her eyes, like she was tired of fighting, tired of hurting. What if he killed her, Sarah? Not literally, but what if the betrayal? The heartbreak. What if it made her vulnerable? What if she gave up because he'd already taken everything that mattered? You can't think like that. Cancer is it's just bad luck sometimes, or sometimes it's what happens when you lose the will to fight. I wiped my eyes roughly. I want to confront him. I want to throw those photographs in his face and make him admit what he did. Make him say it out loud. But he's 71 and recovering from a stroke. His doctor said stress could trigger another one. So what do I do? Let him die with his lies intact? Or risk killing him with the truth? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe you don't have to blow everything up right away. Maybe you can? I don't know. Feel him out first. See if he'll tell you on his own. Why would he? He's kept it secret this long. Because he almost died, People reevaluate their lives after something like that. Maybe he wants to come clean. Maybe he's been waiting for the right moment. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. Better than screaming accusations at a sick old man. Better than staying silent and letting the knowledge poison me from the inside out. When I got back to the house, the lights were off downstairs except for the lamp in my father's study. I found him there sitting at his desk, the same desk where I'd found the photographs, working on a crossword puzzle. "Emma," he looked up, relieved. "You scared us, running off like that." "Sorry. I just needed some air. Come sit with me for a minute." He gestured to the chair across from him. If you're not too tired. I sat studying his face in the lamplight. The lines around his eyes, the gray hair, the slight tremor in his hands that the stroke had left behind. He looked old and tired and human. Not a villain, not a hero. Just a man who'd made choices and lived with the consequences. Or tried to. I want to tell you something, he said, setting down his pencil. I know this hasn't been easy, having Diane here while you take care of me. I know you still have reservations about her. My heart began to pound. Was this it? Was he finally going to tell me the truth? She's a good woman, Emma. She makes me happy. And I know that's hard for you to accept because of your loyalty to your mother. Dad, let me finish, please. He took a shaky breath. Your mother and I. Our marriage wasn't perfect. Toward the end, we weren't happy. But she was a good woman too, and she deserved better than what I gave her. I have regrets about how things ended. A lot of regrets. What kind of regrets? I asked carefully. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming on the desk, right above where the photographs were hidden. So close to the truth, separated by just a few inches of wood. I wasn't always faithful to her, he said finally, not meeting my eyes. In my heart, I mean. There were times when I thought about being with someone else. Times when I was tempted. Tempted? I repeated, the word tasting bitter. But you never acted on it. He looked at me then, and something flickered in his eyes. Guilt. Or maybe relief at the easy out I'd just handed him. I tried to be a good husband, he said. I wasn't always successful. But I tried. It was the closest he could come to a confession, I realized. Admitting to thoughts, to temptation, but stopping short of admitting to action. Stopping short of naming Diane. Stopping short of the truth that might shatter whatever peace he'd made with himself. I could have pushed. Could have told him I'd found the photographs, read the letters, knew everything. But looking at him, old and fragile and still lying even now, I found I didn't have the strength. Okay, Dad, I said quietly. Okay. He smiled relieved and reached across the desk to pat my hand. I'm glad we talked. I want you to understand that Diane isn't trying to replace your mother. No one could. But she's part of my life now, and I hope someday you can accept that. I'm working on it. I lied and stood to leave. Emma, he called as I reached the door. I love you. You know that, right? I looked back at him. This man who'd raised me and lied to me and broken my mother's heart, and was now asking me to love him anyway. I know, Dad, I said. I love you too. And it was true? That was the cruelest part. Despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal, and the photographs hidden in his desk, I still loved him. I just didn't know if I could ever forgive him. I started watching Diane more closely after that conversation with my father. Not obviously, I didn't want to tip my hand, but carefully cataloging every gesture, every word, every interaction. Looking for cracks in her facade, for signs of the guilt she must be carrying. What I found instead confused me. She was genuinely good to my father. Patient when he struggled with simple tasks. Encouraging when he got frustrated. She'd wake in the middle of the night to help him to the bathroom, never complaining about her interrupted sleep. She remembered his medications without being reminded, knew exactly how he liked his coffee, anticipated his needs before he voiced them. It would have been easier if she'd been cruel. If I'd caught her being dismissive or cold when she thought no one was watching. But she wasn't. She cared for him with a tenderness that seemed genuine, and it made me hate her more, somehow. Because my mother had cared for him that way too once. Before he'd broken her, it was a Thursday afternoon, 2.5 weeks into my stay, when Diane came home early from work. My father was napping upstairs, and I was in the kitchen making chicken soup from scratch. My mother's recipe, though I didn't tell Diane that. That smells amazing, she said, setting her purse on the counter. Your father will love it. It's just soup. Still, she poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching me chop vegetables. Emma, can we talk for a minute? My knife stilled against the cutting board. About what? About us. About this. She gestured vaguely between us. This tension, I know you're trying to hide it, but I can feel it. You're angry with me about something, and I don't know what I've done. I could have lied. Should have lied. But the words came out before I could stop them. How long have you known my father? Something shifted in her expression, a wariness, a calculation. What do you mean? It's a simple question. How long have you known him? Well, I met about 4 years ago, at a charity fundraiser. We started dating about 6 months after that. And that's not what I asked. I set down the knife and turned to face her fully. I asked how long you've known him. Not when you officially started dating. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, she just stared at me, and I watched her decide how much truth to tell. "You found something," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes, the photographs." My silence was answer enough. Diane closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there were tears threatening to spill over. I wondered if he'd thrown them away. Part of me hoped he had. Why? So the evidence would be gone. So I'd never know what you did to my mother? It's not. She stopped, gathered herself. It's not that simple, Emma. It seems pretty simple to me. You had an affair with my father. You broke up his marriage. You destroyed my family. And now you're here, living in my mother's house. Sleeping in her bed, playing happy wife like none of it ever happened. You're right, she said quietly, and the admission stunned me into silence. You're right about all of it. I did have an affair with your father. I was part of what broke up his marriage, and I've been living with that guilt for 26 years. Then why are you here? Why marry him? Why not just stay away? Let him have peace in his old age without the constant reminder of his mistakes. Diane pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down heavily, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. Because I love him, Emma. I have loved him since I was 30 years old, and that love has never stopped, no matter how much I wanted it to, no matter how wrong it was. Love. I spat the word like it was poison. You call what you did love. I call it complicated. She looked up at me, and her eyes were red but steady. Can I tell you the story, the real story? Not the version you've created in your head where I'm some evil temptress who stole your father away. There's another version. There's always another version. Whether you'll believe it is up to you. She waited, and when I didn't object, she began. I met your father in 1997. I was 29, working as a paralegal at a law firm downtown. He came in as opposing counsel on a case. We were on opposite sides, but we had to work together on some of the discovery. He was 44, married, completely off limits. I knew that. I reminded myself of it every time we had a meeting. She smiled sadly at the memory. But he was. God, Emma, he was everything I'd ever wanted. Intelligent, funny kind. He treated me like an equal. Not like some secretary to boss around. We'd have these long conversations about philosophy and politics and books. And I'd go home and think about him for hours. I don't need to hear about your crush on my father. You asked for the story. This is the story. Her voice was firm. It stayed professional for almost a year. Just meetings and phone calls and the occasional lunch to discuss the case. But then the case settled, and I thought that would be it. I'd never see him again, and I could move on with my life. She paused, staring at her hands. 2 weeks later he called me. Asked if I wanted to get coffee. I should have said no. I knew I should have said no. But I said yes, and we talked for 3 hours, and when he walked me to my car, he kissed me. My stomach turned. I don't want to hear this. I know. But you need to understand, it wasn't calculated. It wasn't some plot to steal him away from your mother. It was 2 people who fell in love despite knowing they shouldn't, despite it being the worst possible timing, despite all the people who would get hurt. Including my mother. Yes, Diane said softly, including your mother, and I thought about her every single day, Emma. Every time your father and I were together, I thought about the woman whose husband I was stealing. The wife who was home alone while he was with me. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. You could have stopped, I said coldly. You just didn't want to? You're right, I didn't want to, because being with him it was the happiest I'd ever been, and I told myself that if he was with me, his marriage must already be broken, that I wasn't destroying something healthy, just accelerating something that was already ending. Convenient logic. It was. But it was also partly true. She met my eyes. Your parents' marriage was in trouble long before I came along, Emma. I'm not saying that to excuse what I did, but your father told me. He told me they'd been growing apart for years. That they stayed together for you, but the love was gone. That's not. But I stopped, because I didn't know if it was true or not. I'd been 16 when they divorced, consumed with my own teenage drama. Had I noticed the cracks before they shattered? Had I just not wanted to see? The affair lasted about a year, Diane continued. Would meet when he claimed to be working late. We took that trip to Cape Cod when he said he had a legal conference. It was wonderful and terrible at the same time. I loved him desperately, but I also knew it couldn't last. Affairs never do, so what happened? Your mother found out. Diane's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't know how, your father never told me the details. But she confronted him, and he had to make a choice. He chose his family, he chose you, but he didn't stop seeing you. Not right away, no, we tried to end it. We'd break up, stay apart for months at a time. But then one of us would weaken and reach out, and we'd start again. On and off for years. He'd tell me each time that it was the last time, that he couldn't keep doing this to his conscience, and I'd agree, and then 6 months would pass and, she shrugged helplessly. Even while my mother was dying, the words came out choked. No, Diane shook her head firmly. That was one of the few times we truly stayed apart. Your father told me your mother was sick, and I told him he needed to be with his family, that she deserved his full attention in whatever time she had left. We didn't see each other at all during that last year, but you wrote to him. I found the letters. I did. I couldn't completely let go, but I kept my distance physically. I swear that's true. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe there was at least one line they hadn't crossed. But how could I trust anything she said? After your mother passed, Diane continued, I gave him space. Almost 2 years. And then he called me and he said he was tired of hiding. Tired of pretending. That he'd lost enough years already, and he didn't want to lose any more. He wanted to be with me, openly, for whatever time we had left. And you just said yes. Didn't care about how I'd feel. I cared. Her voice broke. I cared so much, Emma. I told him we needed to tell you the truth about our history before we got serious, that you deserved to know. But she stopped, seeming to struggle with whether to continue. He what? He begged me not to. He said you'd been through enough with your mother's death and your own divorce. He said you'd never forgive him if you knew the truth, and he couldn't bear to lose you too. So we agreed to present it as a new relationship. A fresh start. No history, no baggage. Just 2 people who'd met and fallen in love. Another lie. Yes, another lie. And I went along with it because I wanted to be with him, and I was selfish enough to take that deal even knowing it meant lying to you. She wiped her eyes. I'm not proud of any of this, Emma. I'm not the villain in my own story, but I know I'm the villain in yours. I know I helped destroy your family. I know your mother suffered because of me. And I know that no apology will ever be enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the soup simmering forgotten on the stove. Did you ever meet her? I asked finally. My mother? No, never. I saw her picture once, in your father's wallet. She was beautiful, kind eyes. Diane's voice was thick with emotion. I used to imagine what I'd say to her if I ever had the chance. How I'd apologize. How I don't know, try to explain. But there's no explanation that makes what I did okay. No, I agreed. There isn't. I understand if you can't forgive me. I understand if you hate me. But I need you to know, your father is a good man who made bad choices. He loved your mother once, genuinely. And he loves you, Emma, more than anything. Don't let what he did 26 years ago destroy your relationship with him now. That's easy for you to say. You got what you wanted? Did I? She looked at me with something like desperation. I got your father, yes. But I also got a daughter-in-law who hates me, who looks at me like I'm something disgusting. She scraped off her shoe. I got a relationship built on secrets and lies and guilt. I got to live in a house haunted by the ghost of a woman I helped destroy. Is that really winning, Emma? I didn't have an answer for that. Upstairs, I heard my father stirring, calling out. Diane stood automatically, wiping her eyes and composing herself with practiced ease. I'll go check on him, she said. The soup smells wonderful. He'll be so happy. She left me alone in the kitchen. And I stared at the pot of soup, my mother's recipe, bubbling on the stove. I'd made it to comfort my father, to show him I cared. But who was I really trying to comfort? Him? Or the memory of the woman who'd taught me to make it? Everything was so much more complicated than I'd thought. The villain of my story had a face and a history and reasons, even if they weren't good enough. The victim, my mother, was gone, unable to tell her side. And my father, the man at the center of it all, had made choices that hurt everyone, including himself. I didn't know what to do with any of it. But I knew one thing for certain: this conversation with Diane had changed nothing. She'd admitted her guilt, yes. She'd shown remorse, maybe even genuine remorse. But my mother was still dead, and Diane was still here, and nothing could ever make that right. I didn't tell my father that Diane and I had talked. I didn't tell him that I knew everything. For 3 more days, I moved through the house like a ghost, serving meals and administering medications, while my mind churned with everything Diane had revealed. She'd been honest with me, I thought, or at least, as honest as she could be while still justifying her own actions. But honesty didn't equal absolution. Knowing the full story didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. Sarah came to visit on Sunday afternoon, ostensibly to check on my father, but really to check on me. We sat on the back porch while my father napped and Diane ran errands, and I told her everything Diane had said. So she admits it, Sarah said when I finished. She admits she was the other woman, that she helped destroy your parents' marriage, all of it. Yes. She said she's lived with the guilt for 26 years. She said she and Dad tried to end it multiple times but couldn't stay away from each other. I pulled my cardigan tighter around myself. She makes it sound like some tragic love story. Star-crossed lovers who couldn't help themselves. What do you think it was? I think it was selfish. I think two people wanted each other and decided their happiness mattered more than everyone else's pain. I stared out at my father's garden, overgrown now because he hadn't been able to tend it since the stroke. But Sarah, the worst part is, I almost understand it. Not forgive it, but understand it. She loved him, he loved her. And they made terrible choices because of that love. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. I turned to look at her. But it makes them human. Flawed and selfish and human. And I don't know how to hate someone who's that human, even when they've done something unforgivable. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Have you decided what you're going to do? Are you going to confront your father? I have to. I can't keep living with this knowledge and pretending everything's fine. But I'm scared, Sarah. What if the stress triggers another stroke? What if I'm the one who kills him by forcing him to face what he's done? Then you'll have told him the truth. Sometimes the truth is more important than comfort. Is it? I'm not sure anymore. We sat in silence for a moment, and then Sarah asked the question I'd been avoiding. What did your mom know? Did she know it was Diane specifically? I don't know. Diane said Mom found out about the affair. But she doesn't know what details Dad gave her. For all I know, Mom went to her grave, never knowing that the other woman had a name and a face. Or maybe she knew everything and just never told me because she wanted to protect me. You could try to find out. Are there any of your mom's things left? Diaries, letters, anything like that? Dad got rid of most of it after she died. Said it was too painful to keep around. A bitter laugh escaped me. Now I wonder if he was just destroying evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Are you still outside? Could use some help in here when you have a moment. Duty calls, I said, standing. Thanks for coming, Sarah. I needed this. Anytime. Call me after you talk to him, okay? I want to know you're all right. I found my father in the living room, struggling to reach a book on the top shelf of the bookcase. Here, I said, moving to help him. Which one? The Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms. He settled back into his armchair with a grateful sigh. Your mother loved this book. Read it a dozen times at least. The mention of my mother, casual and unprompted, felt like a sign, like the universe was telling me this was the moment. Dad, I said, sitting down on the couch across from him. Can we talk about Mom? His expression became guarded. What about her? About what really happened between you two? About why you got divorced? Emma, we've been over this. No, we've been over the sanitized version. The one where two people just grew apart and nobody did anything wrong. But that's not the whole truth, is it? He set the book down slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I need to know. Because I'm 42 years old and I think I'm entitled to the truth about my own family history. Because you almost died, Dad. And if something happens to you, I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering what really happened. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. Finally, he said, Your mother and I had problems. Real problems. It wasn't anyone's fault, exactly. We weren't right for each other anymore. Did you have an affair? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I watched him wrestle with it, saw the calculations running behind his eyes. How much could he admit to? How much could he deny? What would I believe? Yes, he said finally, and the word seemed to cost him something. Yes, I did. Toward the end of our marriage, I was unfaithful to your mother. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Just one affair. Or more. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. Was it multiple women? Or was it one woman you kept going back to? His silence was answer enough. One woman, I said, and it wasn't a question anymore. Someone you loved. Someone you've been connected to for a long time. Emma. Is it Diane, Dad? Was Diane the other woman? The color drained from his face. For a moment, I thought he might lie. Might try to maintain the fiction for just a little longer. But then something in him seemed to collapse, and he buried his face in his hands. How did you? His voice was muffled, broken. How did you find out? I found the photographs. In your desk. The ones you hid in that secret compartment you thought no one knew about. He looked up at me, and there were tears running down his face. I'd only seen my father cry twice in my entire life. Once at his own father's funeral, and once at my mother's. Seeing it now felt wrong. Like watching a building crumble. I'm sorry, he said, the words barely audible. God, Emma, I'm so sorry, for lying to me, or for what you did to Mom, Beth, all of it. Every choice I made that hurt you and your mother. Every lie I've told in the 26 years since. Every. He stopped, struggling to breathe. I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Like I'm a stranger. Like I'm someone you don't recognize anymore. He wiped his eyes with shaking hands. You're right. You're right about all of it. Diane was the other woman. We had an affair that started in 1997 and never really ended. Even after your mother found out and I promised to stop, we'd break up and get back together, break up and get back together, for years. Even while Mom was dying, no, God, no, that's the one thing I didn't do. When your mother got sick, I cut all contact with Diane. I owed your mother that much at least, to be present for her at the end, to try to make up for some of the pain I'd caused. Did Mom know? Did she know it was Diane specifically? He shook his head. I don't think so. She knew there was someone, but I never told her who. I thought that would hurt less, somehow. If it was just an abstract betrayal instead of a person with a name and a face. That's not for you to decide, I said, my voice hard. She deserved to know who broke her marriage. She deserved to be able to look that person in the eye and, I don't know, confront her. Hate her. Something. You're right. You're absolutely right. I robbed her of that closure because I was a coward. Because I didn't want to face the full consequences of what I'd done. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together. Oh, Emma, I know there's nothing I can say that will make this okay. I know I've broken your trust. But please believe me when I say that I loved your mother. Maybe not the way she deserved to be loved, but I did love her, and I love you more than anything in this world. You have a funny way of showing it. Lying to me for my entire adult life. Marrying your mistress and expecting me to welcome her into the family like nothing happened. I thought. He stopped, started again. After your mother died, after enough time had passed, I thought maybe Diane and I could have a second chance. A real chance, out in the open. I'd already lost so many years hiding what I felt. I didn't want to lose any more. So you decided to rewrite history. To pretend you just met, that there was no baggage, no betrayal. To make me think I was being unreasonable for not instantly accepting her. Yes, and that was wrong. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have. He looked at me with such anguish that I almost looked away. What can I do, Emma? How can I make this right? I don't know if you can. Please, tell me what you need. Do you want me to leave Diane? I will. If that's what it takes for you to forgive me, I'll end it tomorrow. The offer should have pleased me, should have felt like justice. But instead, it just made me tired. Don't you see, Dad? It's too late for that. Whether you're with her or not, you still did what you did. You still betrayed Mom. You still lied to me. Leaving her now doesn't undo any of that. Then what do? I stood up, suddenly needing to move, to not be in the same room with him and his tears and his guilt. You live with it. The same way Mom lived with it. The same way I'll have to live with it now that I know. You don't get to be forgiven just because you're sorry, Dad. Sometimes you just have to carry what you've done. I walked toward the door, but his voice stopped me. Your mother forgave me, Emma. Before she died, we talked, really talked, and for the first time in years, and she told me she forgave me. She said she understood that people make mistakes, that love is complicated. She gave me permission to move on, to be happy again. I turned back slowly. Did she know you were going to move on with the woman you'd cheated on her with? He flinched. No. She didn't know that. Then she didn't forgive what actually happened. She forgave a version of the story that you fed her. A sanitized version where you'd made a mistake but learned from it. If she'd known the truth, that you'd been carrying on with Diane for years, that you'd marry her as soon as enough time had passed, do you really think she would have been so understanding? I don't know, he admitted, his voice small. Neither do I. And we'll never know, because she's dead, and you get to tell yourself whatever story lets you sleep at night. I opened the door. I need some air. Emma, please. But I was already gone. out the door and into the cool afternoon, leaving him alone with his guilt and his memories and the book that my mother had loved. I drove without thinking, ended up at the cemetery where my mother was buried. I hadn't been here since the funeral 5 years ago. It had been too painful, too final. But now I needed to be here, needed to tell her what I'd learned even if she couldn't hear me. Her headstone was simple, Margaret Ann Richardson. Beloved mother, 19/3/2020, not beloved wife. I'd never noticed that before, or thought about what it meant. Had my father chosen those words? Or had I? I couldn't remember. I sat down on the grass in front of her grave, not caring that it was damp and cold. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said out loud. "I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from what he did. I'm sorry he got to rewrite the story, and you didn't get a say in it." The wind rustled through the trees overhead, carrying the smell of early spring growth. Birds sang in the distance. Life going on, indifferent to human pain. "I don't know what to do," I continued. "Part of me wants to never speak to him again, to make him understand what it feels like to lose someone you love. But he's my father, Mom, and he's sick and he's old, and I still love him even though I don't want to. Is that crazy? To still love someone who hurt you this badly?" No answer came, of course. Just the wind and the birds and the ache in my chest that felt like it might never go away. I stayed there for an hour, maybe more, talking to my mother and crying and trying to figure out what came next. When I finally drove back to the house, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that my mother would have loved. Inside, I found Diane in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up when I entered, her expression wary. "He told me you talked," she said. "That you know everything now?" "Yes." "Are you?" She paused. "What happens now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive either of you. I don't know if I even want to. But I'm not leaving yet. Dad still needs help recovering, and I'm not going to abandon him just because I'm angry. Thank you. That's more grace than I deserve. It's not for you," I said coldly. "It's for him. And for my mother, who would have wanted me to take care of him despite everything." Diane nodded, turning back to the stove. "For what it's worth, Emma, I am sorry. I know that doesn't change anything. But I need you to know. I heard you the first time." I left her there and went to check on my father. I found him in his armchair, staring at nothing, the Hemingway book unopened in his lap. "How are you feeling?" I asked, professional and distant, like he was a patient and not my father. "Lost," he said simply. "I feel lost, Emma." I adjusted his pillows, checked his water glass, did all the caretaking tasks I'd been doing for weeks. But I didn't touch him beyond what was necessary, didn't offer comfort, didn't tell him it would be okay. Because I didn't know if it would be okay. I didn't know if we could come back from this, or if the revelations had broken something between us that could never be repaired. All I knew was that the father I'd thought I had, the flawed but fundamentally good man who'd raised me, had been revealed as someone else entirely. Someone who'd made choices that destroyed lives and lied about it for decades. And I had to figure out how to reconcile those two people, the father I'd loved and the man I was learning he really was. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. I continued caring for my father, but a wall had gone up between us, invisible but impenetrable. We spoke only about necessities, medications, meals, physical therapy appointments. The easy conversations we'd once had, the jokes and memories, all of it evaporated like morning dew. My father seemed to age years in those few days. The light went out of his eyes. He stopped trying to engage me in conversation, stopped asking about my students or my life. He just existed, going through the motions of recovery without any real will behind it. Diane noticed, of course. I'd catch her watching us with worried eyes, but she said nothing. What could she say? This was the consequence of their choices, finally coming due after 26 years of avoidance. It was Sarah who finally forced the issue. She showed up unannounced on a Saturday morning, took one look at my face, and announced we were going out for breakfast whether I liked it or not. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said once we were settled in a booth at the local diner, coffee steaming between us. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I haven't. Every time I close my eyes, I see those photographs. Or I remember Mom crying through the walls when I was 16. Or I think about all the years Dad looked me in the eye and lied. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug seeking warmth. How do you forgive something like that, Sarah? Maybe you don't. Maybe some things are unforgivable, but he's my father. He's also a man who made terrible choices. He can be both. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. What do you want to happen here? What would make this better for you? I want my mother back. I want her to have had the life she deserved without his betrayal hanging over her. My voice broke. I want to go back to before I found those photographs, when I could still believe my father was a good man who just had a failed marriage. But you can't. So what can you live with? I stared into my coffee, watching the cream swirl in patterns that reminded me of my mother's marbled painting technique. She'd been an artist too, before marriage and motherhood had consumed her time. I'd forgotten that. How much else had I forgotten about her, or never known? I said slowly, I need to understand what Mom really knew, what she really felt. Because right now, Dad's claiming she forgave him. That she gave him permission to move on. And maybe she did. But maybe she didn't know the whole truth when she said that. And I need to know which version is real. How would you find out? I don't know. Most of her things are gone. Dad cleared out her belongings pretty thoroughly after she died. I paused, a memory surfacing. But Aunt Linda might know something. Mom's sister, they were close. If Mom confided in anyone about the affair, it would have been her. Sarah pulled out her phone. Call her. Right now. Sarah, I can't just. Yes, you can. You need answers and she might have them. Call her. My hands shook as I pulled up Aunt Linda's number. We'd drifted apart after my mother's death. Not from any animosity, but just the natural distance that grows when the person connecting you is gone. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She answered on the third ring. Emma, is everything all right? Hi, Aunt Linda. Yes, everything's fine. Well, not fine exactly. Dad had a minor stroke a few weeks ago, but he's recovering. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry to hear that. Is he all right? Hey, will be. But Aunt Linda, I'm calling because I need to ask you something. About Mom. About her and Dad's divorce. What was you want to know? Did she ever tell you why they really split up? Did she tell you about Dad's affair? Another pause. Longer this time. You know about that? Heart clenched, so it was true. My mother had known, had told her sister, had carried that knowledge. Yes, I found out recently. But I need to know what Mom told you, how much she knew, how she felt about it. Humma honey, I don't know if I should, please. I was crying now, not caring that people in the diner were glancing over. I need to understand. Dad's telling me one version of the story, but I need to know what Mom's version was. And she's not here to tell me herself. I heard Aunt Linda sigh, a sound heavy with old grief and older secrets. All right, but not over the phone. Can you come to my place? Today if possible. This is a conversation we need to have face to face. Aunt Linda lived in Massachusetts, about 2 hours away. Sarah offered to drive, and I accepted gratefully. I texted Diane that I'd be gone for the day, that Dad had all his medications organized, and she should call if there was any emergency. Her response was immediate. Take all the time you need. We'll be fine here. Aunt Linda's house was a small colonial in Northampton, the kind of place that felt lived in and loved. She answered the door herself, and seeing her was like seeing a ghost of my mother, the same gray-blue eyes, the same fine bone structure, though Aunt Linda's hair was still dark where my mother's had gone silver before the chemo took it all. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and old memories. Come in, sweetheart. I'll make tea. We sat in her sunroom, surrounded by plants and afternoon light, and she told me everything. Your mother found out about the affair in early 1998. Aunt Linda began. Her hands wrapped around her teacup. She'd suspected for a while. Late nights, unexplained expenses, that 6th sense wives get when something's wrong. But she confirmed it when she found a credit card statement with charges for a hotel in Cape Cod. Robert had told her he was at a legal conference, but the charges were for a romantic package. Couples massage, champagne, the works. I thought of the photograph, the one labeled Cape Cod, July 1998. Best weekend of my life. My stomach turned. She confronted him. Aunt Linda continued. And to his credit, he admitted it immediately. Told her there was someone else, that he'd been seeing her for about a year. He swore it was over, that he'd end it, that he wanted to save the marriage. But he didn't end it, no. Or rather, he tried, but he kept going back. Your mother could tell. She'd think things were getting better, that they were rebuilding, and then she'd catch him in small lies, about where he'd been, who he'd talked to. She never found proof of them being together again, but she knew. A wife knows. Why didn't she leave him right away? Aunt Linda gave me a sad smile. Because of you, sweetheart. You were 16, about to start your senior year of high school. Margaret wanted to wait until you graduated, until you went off to college and had your own life started. She didn't want to disrupt everything during such an important year. So my mother had suffered in silence for my sake. Had pretended everything was fine while her marriage crumbled around her. The thought made me want to scream. Did she ever find out who the other woman was? Not exactly. Robert never told her a name, but Margaret, your mother, was smart, Emma. She started paying attention, putting pieces together. She found emails on Robert's computer, carefully worded but intimate. They were signed with just a D. She tried to figure out who it was, went through his contacts, his files, but she never confirmed it before she finally filed for divorce. Did she have suspicions about who D might be? Aunt Linda hesitated. There was one woman she mentioned once. Someone named Diane who'd worked as a paralegal on one of Robert's cases. Margaret said she'd met her briefly at a firm party. And something about the way Robert and this woman looked at each other bothered her. But she had no proof, and by the time she was really investigating, Robert had been careful to remove any evidence. It was her, I said flatly. The woman Dad had an affair with. The woman he's married to now. Her name is Diane. Aunt Linda's teacup clattered against its saucer. He married her. He married his mistress. 2 years ago. He introduced her to me as someone he'd recently met. Made it seem like a new relationship. The whole time she was the one who destroyed Mom's marriage. Oh, Emma. Aunt Linda reached over and took my hand. I'm so sorry. Did your mother know before she died? Dad says they talked before the end. That Mom forgave him and told him to move on with his life. But I don't think she knew he'd move on with Diane specifically. No. Aunt Linda said firmly. She wouldn't have. Your mother may have forgiven Robert for the affair in the abstract. She was working on letting go of her anger, especially after the cancer diagnosis. She said she didn't want to die bitter. But if she'd known he was planning to marry the woman who'd helped destroy their marriage. She shook her head. That she never would have condoned. Dad keeps saying Mom forgave him. Maybe she did. Margaret had a big heart, bigger than Robert ever deserved. But forgiveness isn't the same as approval, Emma. She could forgive him for being weak and making mistakes while still believing he shouldn't reward that weakness by marrying his mistress. Those are two different things. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of confusion I'd been carrying. I need to know something else. Was Mom happy after the divorce? Before she got sick? Aunt Linda smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the sadness. Yes, sweetheart, she was. It took her a while, a year or two, to really find herself again. But then she started painting again, do you remember? She joined that art group, made new friends. She traveled to Europe that summer, just her and a group of women from the community center. She was discovering who Margaret was outside of being Robert's wife, and she was happy doing it. I remember the paintings, I said softly. She gave me one for my apartment. A landscape with mountains and water. She was proud of those. Proud of herself for creating again. The cancer took that from her, but for those few years between the divorce and the diagnosis. Your mother was more herself than she'd been in decades. We talked for another hour, about my mother's final years, about the things she'd said and done. About the woman she'd been when she wasn't defined by her failed marriage. Aunt Linda showed me photographs I'd never seen. Mom at an art show, Mom hiking in the White Mountains, Mom laughing with friends at a dinner party. In all of them, she looked free, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She would have wanted you to know the truth. Aunt Linda said as Sarah and I prepared to leave. But she also would have wanted you to make your own choices about your relationship with your father. Don't let Robert's mistakes poison your life the way they poisoned his marriage, Emma. Decide what you can live with, and then live with it. Don't carry guilt or anger that isn't yours to carry. On the drive home, Sarah and I were mostly quiet. I stared out the window, watching the landscape roll by, thinking about everything Aunt Linda had told me. My mother had known about the affair, had suspected Diane specifically, had chosen to forgive but not to condone, had rebuilt her life into something beautiful before cancer took it away. And my father had taken her forgiveness as permission to do exactly what she would have hated most. Marry the woman who'd helped destroy their family. What are you going to do? Sarah asked as we pulled into my father's driveway. I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep pretending everything's normal. Dad and Diane need to understand what they took from her. What they took from me by lying all these years. And then I decide if I can forgive them. Or if some betrayals are too deep to ever heal. I went inside to find my father in his study, Diane beside him, both of them looking up guiltily when I entered. On the desk between them were the photographs, all of them spread out like a confession. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice shaking. "All three of us. No more secrets. No more lies. If there's any chance of fixing this, we need to start with the complete truth." I looked at the photographs, at their younger faces frozen in stolen moments of happiness, at the evidence of betrayal that had been hidden for so long. "All right," I said, pulling up a chair. "Let's talk."